Case 1, Loyce Pickquet Agyeman, Wanda Knuckles, and Mabel Turman, Northeast Atlanta Health and Rehabilitation, Brookhaven, DeKalb County. A 91-year-old World War II veteran called for help. No one came for 24 minutes. When staff finally responded and found him unresponsive, no one initiated resuscitation for nearly an hour. The first call to 911 was not placed until 57 minutes after staff first found him without a pulse. And when paramedics arrived at the door, two nurses began performing chest compressions, a sequence that prosecutors described in court filings as an apparent attempt to create the appearance that resuscitation had been underway all along. That is where this case begins. Not with a hidden camera, not with a lawsuit. With the death of James Dempsey on February 27, 2014, inside Northeast Atlanta Health and Rehabilitation, a licensed skilled nursing facility in Brookhaven, DeKalb County, and with 3 staff members, a primary nurse, a supervising nurse, and a certified nursing assistant, who were present during the events of that morning and who, for nearly 3 years, faced no criminal accountability. James Dempsey was 89 years old. He was a World War II veteran who had been admitted to the facility to recover from hip surgery in 2014. He did not have dementia. He was expected to return home. His family had purchased a hospital bed and a specially equipped van for his homecoming. He never returned home. Northeast Atlanta Health and Rehabilitation was a privately operated skilled nursing facility licensed by the Georgia Department of Community Health under the Healthcare Facility Regulation Division. It was subject to periodic state inspection, annual federal recertification, and the resident rights protections established under the Federal Nursing Home Reform Act of 1987 and the Georgia Bill of Rights for residents of long-term care facilities. 3 staff members were assigned to Mr. Dempsey's wing during the overnight shift. Loyce Pickquet Agyeman of Snellville, Georgia, was a licensed practical nurse and the primary nurse responsible for his care that night. Wanda Knuckles of Beaufort, Georgia, was also a licensed practical nurse and served as the supervising nurse on shift. Mabel Turman of College Park, Georgia, was the certified nursing assistant assigned to the wing. The initial death report classified Mr. Dempsey's passing as a routine medical event arising from his existing health conditions. No criminal investigation was opened. The case would have remained closed, but for a small camera. Before Mr. Dempsey's death, his son Tim Dempsey had grown concerned. He told investigators and reporters that his father had made statements about his treatment that Tim described as troubling. The family had quietly placed a small surveillance camera inside Mr. Dempsey's room. They did not tell the staff it was there. Following his death, the family filed a civil lawsuit against the facility. As part of the civil discovery process, the family's attorney, Michael Prieto, obtained the surveillance footage. That footage sat inside a legal proceeding for years. Then, in November of 2017, the television station 11 Alive broadcast it publicly as part of an investigation by the station's Reveal Investigative Unit. The footage showed what had happened on the morning of February 27, 2014. It showed the timeline. It showed the response. And it showed what the staff did and did not do after finding Mr. Dempsey unresponsive. State records confirmed the sequence. Staff first found Mr. Dempsey unresponsive at 5:28 in the morning. The 911 call was not placed until 6:25 in the morning, a gap of 57 minutes. The footage was also used in the civil case to conduct video depositions of the staff. When supervising nurse Wanda Knuckles was deposed, she initially told the family's attorney that she had immediately begun performing chest compressions when she arrived in the room. The surveillance footage was then played for her in the deposition. Knuckles responded on camera, "Sir, that was an honest mistake. I was just basing everything on what I normally do." According to court filings from the district attorney's office, the sequence unfolded as follows. Mr. Dempsey called for help. Certified nursing assistant Mabel Turman arrived in the room 24 minutes later and found him unresponsive. Turman left to get assistance from Agyeman. Both returned to the room. Neither initiated resuscitation. Knuckles arrived. She also did not initiate resuscitation. Nearly an hour after Mr. Dempsey had stopped breathing, Agyeman and Knuckles began chest compressions. At the same moment, paramedics were arriving through the front door of the facility. Prosecutors described this in court filings as an apparent attempt to create the appearance of ongoing resuscitation for the arriving emergency responders. The Brookhaven Police Department had previously closed its file on Mr. Dempsey's death. After 11 Alive broadcast the footage in November of 2017, the department reopened its criminal investigation. Brookhaven Police Sergeant Brandon Gurley publicly stated that the broadcast had surfaced material detectives had not previously reviewed. The case was transferred to a joint task force with the DeKalb County District Attorney's Crimes Against Elder Persons and Adults with Disabilities Unit. The Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney Gene Canavan led the prosecution team, with assistance from Senior Assistant District Attorney Franklin Engrim and District Attorney Investigator Charles Maupin. Investigators reviewed the original facility incident report, state inspection records, the surveillance footage, the medical examiner's findings, and the depositions taken in the civil lawsuit. The Georgia Board of Nursing's public records confirmed that Knuckles and another nurse who appeared in the footage had voluntarily surrendered their nursing licenses in September of 2017, 10 months after the 11 Alive broadcast and nearly 3 years after James Dempsey's death. The forensic foundation of the criminal case was built on multiple independent layers. These included cardiac and respiratory monitoring data from the facility's equipment, recorded medication administration records, the time-stamped surveillance footage, electronic badge swipe records, confirming each staff member's physical presence in the wing during the relevant period, and the medical examiner's autopsy findings. The Georgia Department of Community Health also conducted an independent facility inspection that documented systemic failures, including delayed response to patients' distress and a delayed emergency call. These elements were not created for the criminal case. They existed independently of it. That is what made them so valuable at trial and in plea negotiations. They were institutional records, created in the normal course of facility operations, that told a complete factual story without relying on any witness's recollection. In February of 2018, a DeKalb County grand jury returned a 5-count indictment. Agyeman was charged with felony murder and neglect of an elder person under Georgia Code Sections 16-5-1 and 16-5-102. Knuckles was charged with depriving an elder person of essential services. Turman was charged with neglect of an elder person. All three were charged with 1 count of concealing the death of another. Defense attorneys moved to suppress the hidden camera footage before trial. They argued that the staff had a reasonable expectation of privacy and that the footage had been obtained without their consent. The trial court denied the motion. On appeal, the Supreme Court of Georgia, in an opinion authored by Justice Carla Wong McMillian in December of 2020, upheld the denial. The court ruled that Knuckles had no reasonable expectation of privacy in the area captured on the recording at the time she was recorded in that setting. The case was assigned to DeKalb County Superior Court Judge Shondiana Morris. In February of 2022, Mabel Turman pleaded guilty to neglect of an elder person and concealing the death of another. Judge Morris sentenced her to 5 years of probation. On March 15, 2022, Loyce Pickquet Agyeman pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, neglect of an elder person, and concealing the death of another. The felony murder charge, which carried a potential life sentence, was reduced to involuntary manslaughter as part of the negotiated plea. Judge Morris sentenced Agyeman to 8 years in prison and ordered her to report to the DeKalb County Jail by noon on March 31st. On March 16, 2022, Wanda Knuckles pleaded guilty to 1 count of concealing the death of another. Judge Morris sentenced her to 1 year in prison and ordered her to report by April 1st. DeKalb County District Attorney Sherry Boston described the case as a landmark case for the state of Georgia and for DeKalb County. Tim Dempsey told reporters, "Anything we do will not bring my dad back, but maybe we saved some other families from what we went through." The Supreme Court of Georgia's ruling in this case, referred to by legal practitioners as the Knuckles decision, established that families across Georgia may install recording equipment inside their loved ones' nursing home rooms without staff consent, provided that applicable federal HIPAA requirements governing the resident's own privacy are not separately violated by the resident or their lawful representative. That single legal holding has permanently altered the oversight landscape for nursing home residents across the state. The case also reshaped how Georgia journalism, civil litigation, and criminal prosecution interact in elder care cases. The civil lawsuit produced the deposition record. The journalism surfaced the footage. The criminal case followed. That sequence, civil case before criminal case, journalism before indictment, would appear again in subsequent Georgia elder care prosecutions. Case 2, Landon Terrell, a 91-year-old man, spent his final night alone in a memory care wing with a single caregiver. He called his daughter multiple times during the night. He left voicemails. He told her he was dying and asked her to come. By morning, he had been transported by ambulance to a regional medical center with multiple rib fractures, a collapsed lung, and damage to 1 kidney. He never regained consciousness. He died 3 days later. The caregiver, a man who had been previously reported by another resident as someone she was afraid of, maintained that the injuries were caused by a fall. A jury heard the evidence and convicted him of felony elder neglect. He was sentenced to 10 years, 5 to be served in prison. That is the Landon Terrell case. This is how the investigation unfolded. Sunrise at East Cobb is an upscale assisted living facility on Johnson Ferry Road in Cobb County, operating under the Sunrise Senior Living national brand. The facility serves residents in memory care and assisted living programs. Memory care residents, those diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, were housed in a dedicated wing with specialized staffing protocols. Landon Terrell, then 33, of Powder Springs, Georgia, was hired as a caregiver in the memory care wing. Evidence introduced at trial established that the facility's director had retained Terrell despite his late arrival on his first day of training. Evidence also established that at least one resident had previously reported to facility staff that she was afraid of him. State Department of Community Health inspectors had visited the facility approximately 1 month before Adam Bennett's death, responding to 4 complaints. The inspectors documented no findings at that visit. The victim was Adam Bennett, 91 years old, a retired businessman and World War II veteran. On the overnight shift of August 14th into August 15th, 2017, Terrell was the only male staff member working. According to trial testimony, he was responsible for the entire memory care wing of frail and cognitively impaired elderly residents single-handedly. Throughout the night, Adam Bennett called his daughter Christine Hook, who lived nearby. He left her voicemails. In those messages, he stated that he was dying and asked her to come immediately. Those voicemails were preserved on Ms. Hook's cellular phone and would later be forensically extracted and authenticated for use at trial. At approximately 7:30 in the morning on August 15th, a day shift caregiver entered Mr. Bennett's room. She found him with a bruised lip and disoriented. Mr. Bennett told her that someone had struck him, and he gestured toward his face, chest, and groin area. He became unresponsive shortly after. Staff called an ambulance. Emergency personnel transported him to Wellstar Kenstone Hospital in Marietta. Physicians documented facial bruising, multiple rib fractures, a collapsed lung, and kidney damage. Adam Bennett never regained consciousness. He died on August 18, 2017. Cobb County police detectives responded to Wellstar Kenstone Hospital and to the Sunrise at East Cobb facility the same morning. Investigators interviewed facility staff, secured the victim's medical chart, obtained the medication administration records and electronic badge swipe records for the overnight shift, and conducted multiple recorded interviews with Terrell. According to the arrest warrant filed in the Cobb County Magistrate Court, Terrell initially acknowledged striking Mr. Bennett during the overnight shift. In subsequent recorded interviews played at trial, Terrell did not repeat that acknowledgement. He maintained that Mr. Bennett had been physically combative, that he had caught him as he began to fall from the bed, and that the injuries resulted from Mr. Bennett's chest contacting the side of the bed during the catch. He acknowledged that Mr. Bennett had complained of pain throughout the night and admitted he had used poor judgment by not escalating the complaints to medical staff or calling an ambulance. Cobb County Police arrested Terrell on August 16, 2017, the morning after Mr. Bennett's hospital admission. He was held at the Cobb County Adult Detention Facility without bond throughout the nearly 2-year period leading to trial. The Cobb County Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Christopher Gullidge, ruled Adam Bennett's death a homicide caused by blunt force trauma consistent with an assault. The medical examiner noted that the pattern of rib fractures, the collapsed lung, and the distribution of bruising were inconsistent with an unwitnessed fall from a low surface. The defense retained its own medical expert, who offered an opinion at trial suggesting that the injuries were consistent with a fall and that Mr. Bennett's age and pre-existing fragility could account for the injury pattern. The voicemails were a separate and significant evidentiary element. They were preserved in real time, unedited, on Ms. Hook's personal cellular phone. The forensic authentication process confirmed their origin and timestamp data. The Office of Cobb District Attorney Joyette Holmes charged Terrell with felony murder, 2 counts of elder abuse, and 1 count of elder neglect. The trial began on July 17, 2019, before Cobb Superior Court Judge S. Lark Ingram. Senior Assistant District Attorney Jason Marbut led the prosecution team. Defense Attorney Aaron Henriksen represented Terrell. The trial lasted approximately 1 week. The prosecution played Adam Bennett's voicemails for the jury. Prosecutor Marbut told the panel, "This is about a 91-year-old man. He spoke to you. The state is asking you to listen. The defense argued that Terrell was an underqualified caregiver placed in an operationally impossible situation by a facility that assigned one person to an entire wing of cognitively impaired elders overnight. Defense attorney Henriksen told the jury, "I'm not suggesting to you that Landon was the greatest caregiver." During the sentencing phase, two of Terrell's co-workers testified that residents had previously complained about him before Mr. Bennett's death. Testimony also established that Terrell had been dismissed from previous caregiving positions for conduct violations involving neglect. Verdict and sentence. After approximately 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a split verdict. Terrell was found guilty of one count of elder neglect, a felony under Georgia Code Section 16-5-101. The jury acquitted him of both elder abuse charges and of the felony murder charge based on abuse. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on the felony murder charge based on neglect. On August 19, 2019, Judge Ingram sentenced Terrell to 10 years, 5 to be served in a state correctional facility and 5 on supervised probation. She denied the family's request for the statutory maximum of 20 years and denied the defense's request for time served. She barred Terrell from caring for elderly persons for the duration of his probation. He was sentenced under Georgia's First Offender Act, which allows for a clean record upon successful completion of the full sentence. The court credited him with the nearly 2 years he had spent in pretrial custody. The Terrell case prompted formal scrutiny by the Georgia Department of Community Health of staffing models for memory care wings, specifically the practice of assigning a single overnight caregiver to an entire wing of cognitively impaired residents. Corrective action plans were filed by the facility with the state regulator. The case became a reference point in state-level discussions about minimum staffing ratios and background screening requirements for assisted living caregivers across Georgia. Case 3, Henry Josu Reynoso, Peggy Bohannon, and Stacy Jackson, Pruitt Health, Shepherd Hills, Lafayette, Walker County. An elderly female resident reported to facility management that a nursing assistant had committed a serious sexual offense against her while providing personal care. Management did not call the police. The head nurse and the facility social worker were informed of the allegation. Neither filed a report with law enforcement. Neither filed the mandatory elder abuse report required under Georgia law. The family called police 4 days later. By the time arrest warrants were issued for the nursing assistant, he had left the state. He has remained a fugitive. This is Case 3. The defendants are Henry Josu Reynoso, Peggy Bohannon, and Stacy Jackson. This is how the failure unfolded and how it was documented. The facility and the caregiver Pruitt Health Shepherd Hills is a long-term care facility on Patterson Road in Lafayette, Walker County. It is one of several Pruitt Health facilities in Georgia. Pruitt Health is a large regional operator of skilled nursing, rehabilitation, and long-term care facilities across the southeastern United States. In 2020, the state of Georgia, mirroring emergency flexibilities issued by the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, authorized licensed facilities to employ temporary nursing assistants without requiring full certified nursing assistant credentialing. The authorization was designed to address the acute staffing shortages created by the COVID-19 public health emergency. Henry Josue Reynoso was hired under that temporary emergency exemption. According to the Lafayette Police Department, Reynoso was not a United States citizen and held deferred action for childhood arrival status at the time of the events. He was not fully credentialed as a certified nursing assistant in Georgia, but was authorized to perform equivalent duties under the emergency exemption. According to the Lafayette Police Department's incident reports and contemporaneous reporting from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the Chattanooga Times Free Press, the alleged offense occurred on or about October 1, 2020. While providing personal care to an elderly female resident, Reynoso allegedly committed an act of aggravated sodomy. The resident reported the offense to facility management on October 16, 2020, 15 days after the alleged incident. Police were not notified for another 4 additional days. During that 4-day gap, the head nurse on duty that night, Peggy Bohannon, and the facility's social worker, Stacy Jackson, were both informed of the allegation. According to statements given to Lafayette Police Detective Heath Owens, they told investigators they had agreed to speak with the resident at a later time, when conditions at the facility had settled, because the building was managing a COVID-19 outbreak. They did not contact law enforcement. They did not file a mandatory report under Georgia Code Section 30-5-8, which governs the reporting of suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of disabled adults and elder persons by any employee or administrator of a care facility. A family member of the resident called the Lafayette Police Department directly on October 20th, 2020. That call is what initiated the criminal investigation. Lafayette Police coordinated with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Georgia Department of Community Health. Through their combined investigation, at least 3 additional residents subsequently came forward with allegations against Reynoso. The Department of Community Health cited the facility at its highest penalty level for failure to protect residents and for failure to comply with mandatory reporting obligations. Lafayette Police Chief Benji Clift confirmed publicly that the facility had failed to report the incident to law enforcement as required under Georgia law. Investigators arranged a forensic medical examination for the reporting resident at a regional hospital. The examination was conducted by a certified sexual assault nurse examiner and documented findings consistent with the allegation. The Department of Community Health's parallel inspection record captured the staffing structure, room assignments, and shift logs for the night in question, along with the documented timeline of the facility's internal reporting and the failure of both Bohannon and Jackson to escalate the matter to law enforcement. Reynoso was charged with aggravated sodomy under Georgia Code Section 16-6-2, subsection A, paragraph 2. The charge carries a minimum sentence of 25 years in Georgia. Peggy Bohannon was charged with failure to report elder abuse under Georgia's mandatory reporting statute. Stacy Jackson was charged with the same offense. Both were accused of knowingly failing to report a suspected offense against a vulnerable adult to law enforcement and to the state, as required by Georgia Code Section 30-5-8. Before arrest warrants could be served, Reynoso departed the area. The Lafayette Police Department publicly identified him as a fugitive. As of the most recent indexed public reporting, he has not been located. The Walker County Sheriff's Office and federal law enforcement partners continue to seek his whereabouts. The criminal dispositions of the charges against Bohannon and Jackson have not been publicly reported in indexed news sources. The case became part of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's continuing investigative series on senior care failures in Georgia, originally published in 2019 by reporters Carrie Teagarden and Brad Schrade. The Shepherd Hills case was incorporated into the AJC's pandemic-era coverage, which documented patterns of reporting failures and inadequate oversight across multiple Georgia assisted living and long-term care facilities. The Georgia Department of Community Health subsequently revised its emergency credential guidance to require enhanced background screening and mandatory supervisory pairing for all temporary aides working under emergency exemption authorizations. The case also prompted Georgia legislators to examine whether the emergency CNA authorization framework contained adequate safeguards and whether those safeguards could be enforced in real time during a public health crisis. Case 4, Jessica Camp Pruitt Health, Lafayette Rehabilitation Center, Lafayette, Walker County. She was a certified nursing assistant. She was on the Georgia Nurse Aid Registry. She held an active credential. She was on probation for a prior felony conviction at the time of the alleged offenses. And none of that stopped her from continuing to work in direct patient care until multiple residents came forward with allegations that she had committed sexual offenses against them while on shift. This is case 4. The defendant is Jessica Camp. This is what the investigation found and why the case exposed a specific failure point in Georgia's credentialing architecture. The 4th case took place at a separate Pruitt Health facility, a rehabilitation center on Roadrunner Boulevard in Lafayette, Walker County, a different location from the Shepherd Hills case covered in Case 3. Both facilities operated under the Pruitt Health brand, but they were distinct licensed properties. Jessica Camp held an active certified nursing assistant credential issued by the Georgia Department of Community Health and listed on the state's Nurse Aid Registry. The registry is the primary regulatory database through which Georgia tracks individuals authorized to perform hands-on care for residents of licensed long-term care facilities. Facilities are required to confirm that an aide's name does not appear on the registry's abuse, neglect, or misappropriation finding section before hiring. According to Walker County Sheriff Steve Wilson and the Lafayette Police Department, law enforcement was dispatched to the rehabilitation center after staff at the facility received allegations from residents that Camp had performed oral sex on multiple male residents while on shift. The allegations described a recurring pattern of conduct, not a single isolated incident. Pruitt Health self-reported the matter to local police and to state regulators, suspended Camp immediately, and terminated her employment shortly thereafter. The case was referred simultaneously to the Georgia Department of Community Health and to the Walker County District Attorney's Office. State inspectors initiated a parallel administrative review of Camp's credential under the Nurse Aid Registry's misconduct provisions. Investigators worked with social workers and adult protective services staff to conduct formal interviews of the residents identified as alleged victims. Multiple residents had documented cognitive limitations. Georgia evidentiary law imposes specific requirements for how statements from witnesses with cognitive impairments are obtained and authenticated for admissibility. Investigators reviewed shift assignment logs, room assignment records, and Camp's electronic badge access records to corroborate the victims' accounts with facility documentation. The Lafayette Police Department arrested Camp on multiple counts of first-degree and second-degree improper sexual conduct by an employee of a long-term care facility. Under Georgia Code Section 16-6-5.1, any sexual contact between an employee of a hospital or long-term care institution and a patient or resident is a felony, regardless of whether the resident appears to consent. The statute explicitly provides that consent is not a defense because the custodial and care relationship places the resident in a position of inherent dependency and diminished autonomy relative to the staff member. Camp was also separately charged with theft by deception for conduct involving financial transactions with residents. Court records reviewed by Fox 5 Atlanta and Fox Chattanooga at the time of Camp's arrest on the nursing home charges revealed the following. Camp had been arrested in May of the same year on unrelated charges. That arrest arose from an incident in which she had consumed psychedelic, mushrooms and alcohol, then resisted arrest, caused approximately $800 in damage to a law enforcement patrol vehicle, and bit a detention officer while being processed at the Walker County Jail. She subsequently pleaded guilty to a felony charge arising from that incident in November of the same year. She was serving a term of probation for that felony conviction at the time of the nursing home allegations. Despite the felony conviction and the active probation status, Camp's certified nursing assistant credential remained listed as active on the Georgia Nurse Aid Registry at the time of the second set of allegations. The registry does not automatically deactivate a credential upon a felony conviction for a non-patient-related offense. A credential is flagged and reviewed when a conviction relates directly to conduct involving patients or residents, or when the Georgia Department of Community Health initiates a separate administrative review. A conviction for unrelated felony conduct, such as the damage and battery charges in Camp's case, does not automatically trigger registry removal. The facility is expected to conduct its own independent background checks, including criminal history verification, at the point of hire and at regular intervals. The Camp case made clear that those independent checks were not catching the gap between the registry's data and the actual criminal history of an active aide. The case remained on the Walker County Superior Court docket as of the most recent indexed public reporting. The Georgia Department of Community Health's Healthcare Facility Regulation Division opened a formal administrative review of Camp's CNA credential under the registry's misconduct provisions. Pruitt Health publicly confirmed that Camp was no longer employed by the company. The case became a reference point for the Georgia Council on Aging in its advocacy for expanding the registry to cover additional categories of home caregivers and for mandating real-time cross-checks between criminal court systems, probation management systems, and the registry database. The Council has argued that the registry, as currently structured, functions as a starting point for screening, not a comprehensive guarantee of a caregiver's fitness at any given moment after hire. The Camp case illustrated that regulatory architecture works only if every component is connected in real time. A registry that is not automatically updated when probation is active, when new criminal charges are filed, or when new convictions are entered provides incomplete protection for residents and facilities alike. Case 5, Algernon Williams Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital. Albany, Dougherty County, the patient was deaf. He could not verbally call for help. When the nursing assistant entered his room and placed his hands around his neck, the patient had no way to alert the nurse's station. He had no way to call out. He had no intercom option that he could use on his own. When the assault ended, he reported it immediately, not through speech but through the only means available to him, by alerting other staff who then contacted law enforcement. That the case reached the criminal justice system at all is a result of the hospital's decision to call the police immediately and cooperate fully with the investigation. This is Case 5. The defendant is Algernon Williams. The defendant is presumed innocent unless and until convicted. This case is included because it documents what a proper institutional response to an allegation against a nursing staff member looks like. and because it illustrates the specific vulnerability of nonverbal inpatients. Phoebe Putney Memorial Hospital in Albany, Dougherty County, is a major regional medical center serving southwest Georgia. The hospital operates an acute care medical and surgical service, a critical care unit, and a behavioral health program. Certified nursing assistant staff in the medical and surgical units assist with daily living activities for adult inpatients, including bathing, repositioning, transfer assistance, and bedside monitoring. Algernon Williams, age 36, held a certified nursing assistant credential issued by the Georgia Department of Community Health and was employed by the hospital in that capacity. According to the Albany Police Department's incident report, the alleged offense occurred on Monday, November 17, 2025, inside the hospital. The patient is described in the police report as deaf and mute. His account was translated for law enforcement officers by a qualified certified interpreter. According to the police report, Williams entered the patient's room, placed his hands around the patient's neck, and attempted to sexually assault the patient during the encounter. Following the incident, the patient communicated what had occurred to other hospital staff. The hospital immediately launched an internal investigation, notified the Albany Police Department, and terminated Williams's employment. The Albany Police Department's investigation incorporated several parallel lines of inquiry. Officers conducted a formal recorded interview of the patient through a certified American Sign Language interpreter. Investigators reviewed hospital corridor surveillance footage and electronic door access logs to establish Williams's movements and the timing of his entry into the patient's room. Forensic medical examination of the patient was also conducted. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was consulted regarding protocols for conducting forensic interviews with nonverbal and deaf witnesses, including best practices for the use of certified American Sign Language interpreters in the context of admissibility under Georgia evidentiary rules. The hospital stated publicly, Phoebe recognizes the seriousness of the allegation made by a patient involving a former certified nursing assistant. The individual is no longer employed at Phoebe. We immediately launched an internal investigation and contacted authorities on behalf of the patient. We are fully cooperating with local law enforcement and providing all necessary information to support their investigation. Our first priority is the safety and well-being of our patients, and we hold every team member to the highest standards of professionalism and integrity. Williams was arrested and booked into the Dougherty County Jail on charges including attempted aggravated sexual battery and false imprisonment, with additional charges under review. The case is expected to be presented to a Dougherty County grand jury for indictment. Williams is presumed innocent unless and until convicted. Because the alleged victim is nonverbal and communicates through American Sign Language, the prosecution will require coordination between the District Attorney's Office, Certified Sign Language Interpreters, Disability Rights Georgia, and the Phoebe Putney Patient Advocacy Office. Georgia courts have developed procedural protocols for deaf witness accommodations, and those protocols will govern the manner in which the patient's account is presented before the grand jury and at any subsequent trial. The Phoebe Putney case is significant for three reasons that extend beyond the individual charges. First, it involved a patient whose physical disability eliminated the most common form of patient self-protection, the ability to verbally alert nearby staff. The hospital's internal reporting system, the surveillance infrastructure, and other staff members' awareness of the patient's communication method were the only available safeguards. All of them functioned. Second, the hospital's decision to contact law enforcement quickly, rather than conducting a closed internal review, reflects the standard required by Georgia law and by federal conditions of participation for Medicare and Medicaid certified facilities. The contrast with the Shepherd Hills case, where law enforcement was not contacted for 4 days despite mandatory reporting requirements, is direct. Third, the case is currently advancing through the criminal justice process in real time, meaning that its ultimate resolution will add to the body of Georgia case law, governing the prosecution of patient abuse involving nonverbal victims and the use of interpreter-mediated forensic testimony. Case 6. Danielle Gates Anchor Hospital, College Park, Clayton County. A male patient in group therapy reported that his nurse pulled him from the session, walked him to his room, and engaged in inappropriate physical contact with him. He said she was intoxicated. He reported it immediately. Hospital administrators reviewed the surveillance footage from the corridor cameras and saw what he described. The nurse walking him away from the group session and toward his room. The footage corroborated his account before the police arrived. This is Case 6. The defendant is Danielle Gates. This is the investigation. The facility and the Nurse Anchor Hospital is a psychiatric and addiction treatment facility on Yorktown Drive in College Park, Clayton County. It operates as part of the Southern Crescent Behavioral Health System, which is a subsidiary of Universal Health Services, Incorporated, one of the largest private behavioral health operators in the United States. The patient population at Anchor Hospital includes adults in crisis stabilization, adults managing substance use disorders, and adults with co-occurring psychiatric and substance use diagnoses. The clinical model relies on group therapy, individual sessions, structured daily routines, and nursing staff who are responsible for clinical assessments, medication administration, and behavioral monitoring. Danielle Gates, age 29 at the time of the incident, held a Georgia-registered nurse license and was assigned to the adult psychiatric ward. In the spring of 2013, a male patient receiving care at Anchor Hospital reported to hospital administrators that Gates had approached him during a group therapy session, removed him from the session, escorted him to his room, and engaged in sexual contact with him during the encounter. The patient stated that Gates appeared to be intoxicated at the time. He reported the incident immediately upon returning to the general ward area. Hospital administrators directed security personnel to review the corridor surveillance footage. The footage showed Gates walking the patient away from the group therapy room in the direction of his room. That footage corroborated the factual foundation of the patient's account, specifically that Gates had removed him from the group therapy setting and walked him toward the private area of his room. The footage was preserved and provided to the College Park Police Department. The College Park Police Department opened a formal investigation. Based on the patient's report, the hospital's internal incident documentation, and the corroborating surveillance footage, investigators applied for and received an arrest warrant. Gates turned herself in voluntarily following issuance of the warrant. She was charged with sexual assault at a hospital or treatment institution under Georgia Code, Section 16-6-5.1. Under that statute, any sexual contact between an employee of a hospital, treatment institution, or behavioral health facility and a patient or resident in that facility's care constitutes a felony, regardless of whether the patient appears to consent. The statute was enacted to address the inherent power imbalance in therapeutic settings and to eliminate the consent defense in its entirety for conduct involving treating staff and their patients. Gates appeared before Clayton County Magistrate Judge Richard Brown at her initial appearance. Judge Brown set her bond at $10,000, noting as a factor in favor of bond her decision to surrender voluntarily. In open court, Judge Brown noted the existence of surveillance footage showing Gates escorting the patient from the group therapy session, a fact that corroborated a central element of the patient's account. The case was transferred to Clayton County Superior Court for grand jury presentation and indictment. In cases of this category, nurse-on-patient sexual misconduct in a behavioral health setting, the evidentiary record typically includes hospital, corridor and ward surveillance footage, electronic badge swipe records documenting room entries and exits, the patient's contemporaneous verbal report to other hospital staff, the hospital's internal incident report filed with both local law enforcement and the Georgia Department of Community Health, and independent staff observations regarding any signs of impairment in the accused during the relevant shift. In the Gates case, the combination of the patient's immediate self-report and the corroborating corridor footage established a strong initial evidentiary foundation before any law enforcement investigation had been formally opened. The final criminal disposition of the Gates case was not published in indexed news reports. Clayton County Superior Court records reflect that the indictment was entered and proceedings advanced. Families and employers seeking information about the current status of any Georgia registered nurse credential may access the Georgia Board of Nursing's public licensure verification records through the Georgia Secretary of State's online portal. Any disciplinary action, including voluntary surrender, suspension, or revocation, would be reflected in those records. The Anchor Hospital case became part of a broader investigation by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution into safety practices at Anchor Hospital and at the chain of psychiatric facilities operated by Universal Health Services. A civil lawsuit filed in 2017 alleged that prior incidents at Anchor Hospital had not been handled appropriately. A review by the Citizens Commission on Human Rights International in November of 2017 cited the Gates case as part of a documented pattern of patient sexual assault allegations across UHS-operated facilities nationwide. Following the incident, Anchor Hospital implemented a two-staff escort requirement for patient movements between therapy spaces and private rooms and adopted a formal policy requiring alcohol testing for clinical staff when impairment is suspected on shift. The Georgia Department of Community Health incorporated staff impairment as a specific inspection focus area for behavioral health facilities. Case 7, Jeannette Mary Hokanson, Fulton County Home Health Agency. Fulton County, the patient died on September 18, 2012. That death was natural and was not the subject of any criminal allegation. What happened next is the subject of this case. In the weeks following the patient's death, their assigned home health nurse continued to submit visit notes to her employer. Visit notes that documented in-person nursing assessments and services, bearing what appeared to be the patient's own signature. The patient had been dead for weeks. 19 felony counts followed. This is case 7. The defendant is Jeannette Mary Hokanson. This is the fraud investigation. Home health agencies licensed in Georgia provide skilled nursing visits to patients receiving care in their own residences. The agencies bill Georgia Medicaid for each visit performed by a credentialed nurse. Each visit must be documented through a written or electronic visit note that records the clinical assessment performed, the services provided, and the patient's acknowledgement signature. The patient's signature is both a care coordination record and a billing support document. The nurse is required to sign each note with an attestation certifying that she personally performed the visit. Jeannette Mary Hokanson held a Georgia registered nurse license. She had been employed by a home health agency operating in Fulton County since October of 2007, providing in-home skilled nursing services to Medicaid-enrolled patients. On September 18, 2012, one of Hokanson's assigned patients was pronounced dead in Atlanta. The death itself was natural. The family reported it to the appropriate authorities. A death certificate was issued. The patient's care records were supposed to close on that date. According to the Georgia Office of the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, Hokanson instead continued to generate and submit nursing visit notes to her employer after the date of the patient's death. The notes documented visits that she certified, under oath-equivalent attestation clauses, had been personally performed by her. The majority of the falsified visit notes bore a signature purporting to be that of the deceased patient, written, according to investigators, by Hokanson. The Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, working in coordination with the Home Health Agency, conducted a billing audit that matched the visit note submissions against the patient's date of death, as recorded on the official death certificate issued by the state of Georgia. The audit confirmed that visit notes bearing the deceased patient's apparent signature had been generated and submitted for payment for weeks following the confirmed date of death. Forensic document examiners reviewed the disputed visit notes. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Document Examination Unit assisted in the analysis. Examiners compared the purported patient signatures on the post-death notes against authenticated signature specimens drawn from the patient's pre-death medical chart at the Home Health Agency and from records maintained by the patient's primary care physician. The forensic analysis produced findings consistent with forgery. Investigators also reviewed Hokanson's cellular phone location data and the agency's electronic charting timestamps during the period covered by the disputed notes. Independent witness accounts were obtained to determine whether any nurse had in fact visited the residence during the relevant period. The investigation confirmed that no visits had occurred. On Tuesday, November 19, 2013, a Fulton County grand jury returned an indictment against Hokanson on 19 felony counts. The charges were as follows: identity fraud under Georgia Code Section 16-9-120. This charge addresses the use of another person's identifying information, including their signature, without authorization and for the purpose of financial benefit. Under Georgia law, each count of identity fraud carries a sentence of 1 to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $100,000. Forgery in the first degree under Georgia Code Section 16-9-1. This charge addresses the creation of a falsified document with intent to defraud. Under Georgia law, each count carries a sentence of 1 to 15 years in prison. False statements and writings under Georgia Code Section 16-10-20. This charge addresses knowingly making false statements in documents submitted to government programs, including Medicaid. Under Georgia law, each count carries a sentence of 1 to 5 years in prison. The Hokanson case represents a category of harm that is distinct from the physical abuse and neglect cases in this documentary, but that is no less serious in its implications. The patient whose identity was used was not physically harmed after death, but their signature, their identity, and their legal record were exploited by the very nurse assigned to care for them. The forged visit notes, submitted for Medicaid payment, constituted fraud against the state of Georgia and against the federal Medicaid program. They also constituted a violation of the trust that families place in home health visit documentation. Trust that their loved one is being assessed, monitored, and cared for at the frequency required by their plan of care. The Office of the Attorney General incorporated the Hokanson indictment into its training curriculum for home health agency administrators. The Medicaid Fraud Control Division subsequently expanded its auditing protocols to include systematic comparison of home health visit billing records against vital statistics data, specifically to identify claims submitted for visits that purportedly occurred after a patient's recorded date of death. The Georgia Board of Nursing initiated an independent administrative review of Hokanson's registered nurse license under the board's standard policy for licensees charged with felonies involving moral turpitude or fraud. Case 8. Dawayne Wilson, a Walton County hospital. Walton County, a 52-year-old woman was admitted through the emergency department complaining of chest pains. She was medicated, anxious, and, as the court record describes, not in her normal state of mind. She was assigned a male nurse. She was discharged approximately 2 days later. About 1 month after her discharge, she filed a report with the Walton County Sheriff's Office. What she described had occurred inside her hospital room while she was a patient receiving treatment, and the law had already closed the consent defense before she ever walked through that emergency room door. This is Case 8. The defendant is Dawayne Wilson of Loganville, Georgia. This is how the investigation and prosecution unfolded. Before this case is examined in detail, the applicable Georgia law must be understood, because it is central to how the prosecution proceeded. Georgia Code Section 16-6-5.1 makes it a felony for a healthcare professional, including a nurse, to engage in sexual contact with a patient while the patient is in the care of that professional, regardless of whether the patient appears to consent. The statute was enacted because the Georgia General Assembly recognized that a patient in a clinical setting is not in a position of equal autonomy relative to their treating nurse. The patient depends on the nurse for medication, communication, access to the outside world, and basic physical care. Under those conditions, consent is not considered legally meaningful. The statute does not require a showing of force or coercion. The professional relationship is itself the disqualifying factor. The patient was 52 years old. She presented to a hospital emergency department in Walton County on February 21, 2009, reporting chest pains. She was admitted for cardiac monitoring. Her care record from admission notes that she was not in her normal state of mind at the time of her admission, a clinical assessment that would carry legal weight in the prosecution's framing of the case. Dawayne Wilson, age 41, of Loganville, was the nurse assigned to her care during the admission. She was discharged approximately 2 days after admission. Approximately 1 month later, she filed a complaint with the Walton County Sheriff's Office. Walton County Sheriff's investigators interviewed the patient and her daughter. The patient described a series of incidents during her hospital stay. Wilson had rubbed her breast, had made comments about her physical appearance, and expressed sexual interest in her, and had exposed part of his genitals to her. Investigators reviewed her hospital chart, the patient assignment roster confirming Wilson's care responsibilities during the relevant shifts, and the medication administration record documenting what Wilson had administered to her during her stay. Other hospital staff present on the unit during those shifts were also interviewed. Because of a conflict of interest concern involving the local district attorney's office, a special prosecutor, Brian Patterson, was appointed to handle the case independently. A grand jury indicted Wilson on 5 counts, including multiple counts of sexual battery and public indecency, and charges under Georgia Code Section 16-6-5.1. Following negotiation between the special prosecutor and defense counsel, and following consultation with the victim and her family, Wilson entered a guilty plea to 3 of the 5 counts. The negotiated plea included 1 year in a state correctional facility for the first count of sexual battery, 1 year of probation plus associated fines and fees for the second count of sexual battery, 1 year of probation plus associated fines and fees for the public indecency count. The 2 remaining sexual assault charges were dropped as part of the agreement. Wilson was also barred from working in any nursing capacity during the period of his sentence as a condition of the plea. The 2 remaining counts of sexual assault against a patient were dismissed as part of the agreement. Wilson was also barred from practicing as a nurse during the full period of his sentence. Special Prosecutor Patterson told reporters that the victim and her family had reviewed and accepted the terms. He stated that the victim still has feelings of fear and fright but supports the plea bargain. He also noted that the changes to Georgia law made it clear that professional healthcare settings are environments in which the consent defense does not apply, that a nurse claiming a patient consented to sexual contact during a clinical admission was making an argument the statute had already foreclosed. The Watson case became a standard reference point in Georgia nursing ethics continuing education on the application of Georgia Code Section 16-6-5.1 to inpatient care settings. Hospital systems across Georgia conducted internal reviews following the case, examining whether same-gender pairing for intimate personal care tasks was being appropriately applied and whether the scheduling of overnight shifts created unmonitored one-on-one nurse-patient situations that elevated risk. Those reviews informed updated patient care assignment policies at multiple Georgia hospital systems. Case 9, Cheryl Lynn Bates and Teresa Katharina Smart, Gwinnett County Adult Detention Center. Gwinnett County, 2 licensed practical nurses, both employed by the same correctional healthcare contractor. Both arrested within 4 weeks of each other at the same jail. One charged with sexual assault of an inmate. One charged with stealing a prescription antidepressant from the jail pharmacy and providing it to an inmate for whom the prescribing physician had explicitly discontinued the medication. Both cases arose from conduct inside the Gwinnett County Adult Detention Center in 2013. This is Case 9. The defendants are Cheryl Lynn Bates and Teresa Katharina Smart. This is the documentation. The Gwinnett County Adult Detention Center is the primary pretrial detention facility for Gwinnett County. Medical services at the facility were provided at the time by Corizon Correctional Healthcare, a private contractor operating under a service agreement with the Sheriff's Office. Licensed practical nurses employed by Corizon at the facility were responsible for medication administration, intake medical screenings, sick call responses, and routine care for people in custody. Georgia Code Section 16-6-5.1 explicitly extends correctional settings. It makes sexual contact between an employee or agent of a jail, prison, or other custodial facility and a person in custody a felony, regardless of any claim of consent. The statute reflects the recognition that an incarcerated person is in a position of total institutional dependency relative to the staff members responsible for their care and custody. Cheryl Lynn Bates, age 44, of Stone Mountain, Georgia, was a licensed practical nurse working for Corizon at the detention center. According to the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, Bates was charged with sexual assault arising from sexual conduct with an inmate at the facility. She was arrested on or about October 7, 2013. She was booked into the Gwinnett County Adult Detention Center, the same facility where she had been working, and was subsequently released on bond. The matter was referred to the Gwinnett County District Attorney's Office for felony prosecution under Georgia Code, Section 16-6-5.1. Less than 4 weeks later, Teresa Katharina Smart, age 31, also of Stone Mountain, Georgia, was arrested by Gwinnett County deputies. According to arrest warrants reviewed by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the Gwinnett Daily Post, Smart was employed as a licensed practical nurse by Corizon at the same facility. Between August 1st and September 23, 2013, Smart obtained 8 tablets of Wellbutrin, each at 100 milligrams, from the jail's controlled pharmacy. She provided those tablets to a male inmate, Bruce Coley, with knowledge that the inmate's prescribing physician had discontinued that medication for that specific patient. Smart was charged with theft by taking and with the sale, distribution, or possession of dangerous drugs. Both charges were initially filed as misdemeanors. Her bond was set at $11,400. She was released after posting bond on the day of her arrest. Inmate Bruce Coley was subsequently arrested on a probation violation on October 30, 2013. No public disclosure was made regarding whether the probation violation was related to the Wellbutrin allegation. In both cases, the investigation was conducted by the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office in coordination with the District Attorney's Office. The Sheriff's Office relied on inmate complaints, internal pharmacy audits, electronic medication dispensing records, and surveillance of the medical area of the jail. In the Smart case, the pharmacy audit was the anchor of the evidentiary record. The dispensing system required each controlled medication to be electronically signed out by a credentialed nurse. The audit trail identified Smart as the nurse who had signed out the 8 tablets of Wellbutrin during the period in question. The fact that the prescribing physician had already discontinued the medication for Coley meant that there was no clinical justification for the dispensing and no authorized purpose for the transaction. The Bates and Smart arrests were not isolated events at the facility during that period. A Gwinnett County deputy, Lisa Ziegler, was arrested during the same period on separate sexual assault charges involving an inmate. She was indicted by a grand jury, dismissed from employment, and held without bond pending a hearing. The cluster of arrests during a concentrated period prompted public scrutiny of staff on inmate misconduct at the facility and drew attention from the Georgia Department of Corrections, which oversees standards for county correctional facilities. The sheriff's office confirmed both nursing arrests publicly and stated that disciplinary matters at the facility were being handled with full transparency. Both nurses faced administrative review proceedings before the Georgia Board of Nursing. The cases contributed to subsequent cycles of contract renewal negotiations between the sheriff's office and Corizon, in which county officials across Georgia revisited oversight clauses in jail medical services contracts, including provisions for unannounced pharmacy audits, mandatory incident reporting to the sheriff's office, and clearer operational separation between medical and security functions inside the jail. Case 10, Naomi Maria Anthony, Fulton County Jail, Fulton County. A handwritten note. That is what began this investigation. A handwritten note passed to jail staff alerting them that a member of the nursing staff was engaged in an inappropriate relationship with an inmate and had been bringing contraband into the facility in exchange for payment. That note triggered a digital investigation, electronic access logs, housing unit camera footage, inmate telephone recordings, financial records. By the time investigators had completed their review, a contract nurse was in custody. She was booked into the same jail where she had worked. This is Case 10. The defendant is Naomi Marie Anthony. This is the investigation. The Fulton County Jail is one of the largest pretrial detention facilities in the southeastern United States, operated by the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. The jail houses thousands of pretrial detainees at any given time and has been the subject of sustained federal oversight. In July of 2023, the United States Department of Justice opened a formal investigation into the jail under the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act. In January of 2025, the Department of Justice proposed a consent decree to address conditions of confinement. United States Attorney Ryan K. Buchanan stated that the proposed decree addressed a pattern of treatment of people in custody that was inhumane and frequently violent. Medical services at the Fulton County Jail were provided by NAFCare, a private correctional healthcare contractor operating under an agreement with the Sheriff's Office. Naomi Marie Anthony, age 34, was employed as a contract nurse through NAFCare. According to public records reviewed by nurse.org and confirmed by materials from the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, the investigation began when jail staff received a handwritten note. The note alleged that Anthony had formed an inappropriate personal relationship with an inmate over a period of months and had smuggled contraband into the jail in exchange for monetary payment. Sheriff's investigators reviewed Anthony's electronic badge access logs, documenting her movements through the facility's secure housing units over the relevant period. They reviewed housing unit camera footage from secure entry checkpoints and unit interior cameras. They reviewed the jail's contraband seizure records and identified items consistent with those described in the note. They obtained and reviewed recorded inmate telephone calls, a standard investigative tool in correctional misconduct cases, because incarcerated individuals routinely discuss arrangements with staff in calls recorded and preserved by the jail's telephone management system. Investigators also reviewed Anthony's financial records to corroborate the allegation that she had received payment following the investigation. Anthony was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, crossing a guard line with weapons, intoxicants, or drugs, a charge under Georgia law addressing the smuggling of prohibited items into a secured correctional facility, possession of items prohibited for inmate possession, violation of oath by a public officer, applicable to any person exercising official authority or operating in a role of official trust within a government facility, sexual assault by an employee of a custodial facility under Georgia Code, Section 16-6-5.1. Anthony was booked into the Fulton County Jail following her arrest and held pending bond determination. NAFCare confirmed the termination of Anthony's employment and issued a public statement citing the company's stated zero-tolerance policy for fraternization and contraband. Fulton County Sheriff Patrick Labatt issued a statement that the conduct alleged was incompatible with the duties of any employee or contractor operating inside the facility. The Anthony case provides a clear illustration of how contemporary digital infrastructure makes correctional staff misconduct increasingly documentable. The investigative tools available to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office included, in combination, electronic badge swipe records showing exactly when and where Anthony had been inside the facility, housing unit camera footage from secure entry points and interior positions, the jail's electronic medication dispensing audit trail to flag any related drug diversion, Anthony's external financial records to corroborate the payment allegation, and the facility's inmate telephone recording system, which preserves every outgoing and incoming inmate call, and which in this case produced recordings that corroborated the nature of the relationship described in the initial note. That evidentiary constellation is now standard in well-resourced county jails. The handwritten note that started this case would, in a less digitally equipped facility, have been difficult to corroborate. In the Fulton County Jail, with its badge systems, cameras, telephone monitoring, and pharmacy audit infrastructure, corroboration was methodical. The Anthony case reinforced a pattern that has been well documented in correctional nursing literature. The vulnerability of medical staff working inside correctional facilities to boundary erosion and to manipulation by people in custody, and the corresponding harm to inmate patients when those boundaries are violated. The American Nurses Association Code of Ethics, in Provision 2.3 of its 2025 revision, states the following: nurses develop professional boundaries to protect the patient and to mitigate power imbalances with recipients of care. Nurses pay careful attention when they are at risk of deviating from the therapeutic relationship by becoming over or under-involved with recipients of nursing care. That standard applies as fully inside a county jail as it does inside a hospital. The person in custody seeking care from a jail nurse is still a patient. The clinical duty of care does not disappear at the booking desk. Following Anthony's arrest, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office and NAFCARE implemented revised protocols for medical staff access to secure housing units. These included stricter logging requirements for one-on-one staff-inmate interactions, mandatory body camera requirements for non-clinical movements by medical staff through housing units, and enhanced anonymous reporting channels for both staff and inmates to flag suspected misconduct. Those revised protocols are now subject to monitoring under the framework of the broader federal proposed consent decree governing conditions at the jail.